Good morning, everyone. I saw a couple of posts where people were thinking they've used too much glitter on their tumbler, so I was just gonna stop in real quick and show you guys how I glitter my tumblers. I've tried Mod Podge and I don't care for that because it generally takes 2 coats to get rid of the streaky look. So I use epoxy as my glue, and I have found that works best for me. I always say in my videos that I think it's best if everybody looks at different videos of how people do things and just kind of create a method that works the best for you. And that's exactly what I've done here. So the first thing I do, I start out with my tumbler. Now I want to prepare that tumbler for the application of paint or glitter or whatever it is I'm going to be putting on. So I will sand the tumbler, and the first thing I do is tape it, and then I will sand it, and I just run sandpaper over, and then I will wash it off. And I do that with the tape on. That's fine. It's not going to mess the electrical tape up. And when I tape it, I'll leave a little tab so that when I'm finished I can pull that off very easily, and I'm not fishing through glitter and epoxy to get to the end of the tape. So I use a little turntable. This one's very well loved. I got it from Amazon, and I just put a little bit of aluminum on the top to keep it from getting really gross. So we'll move this out of the way. And for the epoxy part, honestly, most of the time I just use I'm going to move this a couple different ways because I don't know how my phone is going to, which direction it's going to do today. I just use the Illuminate Amazing Clear Cast as the glue. It's cheaper, it's easier to find, and it works fine for me. Now, if I'm doing a white cup, I will probably go ahead and use FX. I personally use FX Standard, and I really love it. So, I've mixed up some, find the camera here. I've mixed up some this morning, and it's not all the way mixed, so we'll just whip it up. Well, I say whip it, but just stir it. If you're doing this for the base coat, it doesn't really matter if you're getting air bubbles, because you're going to be covering it with glitter and they'll pop. So, and if they don't, you won't be able to see them. So I just make sure that's very well stirred, because you want it to cure properly. And I'm outside this morning because it's really a nice morning and the wind isn't blowing, and I thought maybe that would also help capture the beautiful sparkle that this glitter gives off. So we're going to get started. Alright, if you like to do the bottom of your cup, you just wouldn't tape it off and you would just spray your base coat on the entire cup. The base coat will give you, sorry about the plane going over. The base coat's going to give you a different look. You can use the same glitter and you can have different looks based on what the base coat is. So if I were to do white, the color is going to be more brilliant. If I do black base coat, then the color would be generally more rich. Today I'm using a color that's fairly close to Surf's Up, which is the glitter that I'm going to be using. So that's how I do that. And if you do plan on glittering the bottom, you can do, there's a little hack, because once it's glittered, you're going to need to leave it for a few hours before you can do anything else. So normally what I do is shove a pool noodle in, and I press it against myself to make sure it's in there securely, and then I have a piece of PVC pipe. I'm struggling with getting in frame this morning, and I just push that in and push it all the way down, and then you can handle that without getting the stuff on your hands or messing it up. I usually leave a little bit of extra room, so I cut my pool noodle about 10 or 11 inches so that there's enough room where I can handle it to get it off. And then I just use a wire paper towel rack to slide the pool noodle right over once I'm finished with the glitter process, and I just leave that sitting on the counter for 3 or 4, 5 overnight, whatever hours, to let the epoxy glitter base completely cure. Alright, so today I am going to not do the bottom, so I won't need that. If I'm not going to do the bottom, I just put my hand in it, because I'll have really good control over turning the cup just by flipping my hand around. Alright, so you can apply the epoxy with a brush, or you can do it with a gloved finger. You can use these little makeup applicator things. They're silicone, so when you're done, you just put some rubbing alcohol on a paper towel and just wipe it clean. They work really great because then you can control the thickness of the layer. You want a pretty thin layer, not so thin that it's separating, but not so thick that it's running a whole lot. The thicker your layer of glitter, the more glitter you're going to be using. So you really just want enough epoxy on there to let the glitter adhere to it, so it's going to give you good coverage. So I'm going to attempt to show you that this morning. Let me just set up real quick a piece of butcher paper to catch the glitter. I just save butcher paper from when I do sublimation so that I can use it for this very reason. When I'm doing the epoxy part of it, I'm going to just have this piece, and then to catch my glitter, I have another piece. You can also use aluminum foil sheets that come in a box. They work great for catching your glitter as well. Okay, enough chatter. So, again, I'm trying to make sure I'm in frame here. So we're just going to scoop a little bit of epoxy out with your little brush or with your finger. I do find that a brush for this part does help you to get off a lot of your excess epoxy. And you don't really need very much. For a 30-ounce tumbler, this morning I mixed 2 drams of each part. And I'm sure I'll have enough left over for probably, something. If I needed to, maybe I needed a little bit of epoxy on a acrylic keychain or something. You'll have enough left over probably. But I'd rather go ahead and make enough than not enough. Alright. So I'm going to try to be quick with this. And you're going to want to wear gloves when you're working with epoxy, because that is a chemical. And you just want to be safe. I use the nitro gloves. I get them from Allegra Medical. Alright, I'm going to speed this up by doing the glove finger to get it on, because I can get it on quicker with that. And then I'll come back with my little brush to kind of get some of the excess off. So all you're doing is going around making sure that you get along your tape line. And if you're doing the bottom, you're going to make sure you get the edges real good, because if there's no epoxy, then you're going to have a gap. Here I am, not in frame again. I should have made a big X on my paper so I'd know where my cup needs to be. And I should have had a glove on this other hand, because I'm getting the epoxy on my arm. Because I go off the end of the tumbler. Just make sure you go off the end to make sure your rim is coated well. Alright. So we're moving right along here. All right, I'm going to pause the video for just a moment so you don't have to watch me put epoxy on for a couple of minutes. All right, the tumbler has epoxy on it, so now we're going to take this brush again and just go back over it to just kind of remove some of that excess epoxy so that it's not super thick. And you don't want to scrape it all off. You just want to leave a nice little coat. So I'm going to just kind of work it around. Until it's fairly even. You want it to be even with no runs in it or no big lines of epoxy that are sitting there, because that's going to show in your end result. All right. All right, so again, just make sure everything is coated well. Make sure you get your rim. And I know I'm getting epoxy everywhere, but that's okay. I'm going to throw this butcher paper out. And if you need to use your glove finger again, that's fine, to smooth it out. What the idea was just to get some of that epoxy off. Because again, the less amount of epoxy there is, then the less amount of glitter you'll need to coat your tumbler. Okay, so we're just going back around, make sure it's not too thin. If your finger is dragging in any spot that's too thin, you might want to put a little bit more there. And again, you can just do the glove itself. You don't have to use any kind of brush. But I do find using a brush gives you a little bit more control over the amount. And if you're using a base coat that's super different than your glitter, you might want to use just a little extra epoxy to make sure that it's going to be thick enough to cover. Okay, I feel it dragging just a little bit right here. So we're just going to try to do that. And then what I'll do is kind of spin the cup for a second to allow the epoxy to calm down a bit and level itself out. Epoxy is self-leveling, so if you see any lines there, they will lay down and get flattened out, so that when you put your epoxy on, you're not going to have the lines like you would with the Mod Podge. All right. And I always just take an extra spin just to make sure everything is nice and coated and nothing has, there are no bare spots. A couple of seconds of extra preparation gives you a better end result, I think. All right, so now we're just going to move all this stuff to the side and get it out of our way. I don't want to put my other paper on top of this because I want to be able to reclaim my glitter, and I don't want that sticking to this paper. All right. So there we are. All right, so I'm going to open up this gorgeousness. And I'm not sure if you can see that sparkle, but it's off the charts. So you're just going to put a little coat on. And I'm hoping the wind doesn't pick up. You're going to want to try to go around it at least once before you have to refill your container. At least for me, that's what I try to do, because when you sit your cup down, it's going to be, that epoxy is going to be oozing, and you're going to get a line. Now the wind, of course, is going to pick up. My hair's getting in my face. I'm trying to keep it low because it is flying. This glitter is very fine. And it does like to float. So if you're doing it outside, of course, most people wouldn't, but if you're doing it outside, of course, it's going to float. And I have quite a bit of ways to go. I'm getting a little crazy with the amount I'm putting on here. So I might have to stop very quickly and refill my container. But if you do, just be quick about it. Because the glitter will run, then you'll have like a swirl tumbler. If that's what you're looking for, that's great. But if not, then you just want to be quick. Alright, so again, I'm going to be super fast to refill this container. Just keep on going. Sorry, I'm going a little slower because I'm trying to control the floating. Alright, so that's the first coat. Now you might be able to see that it looks kind of shiny or like wet looking. You just want to continue to go around the cup until you no longer see that, to make sure that the epoxy is soaking up all this glitter. And once that happens, you'll be able to sit this down and it won't move. All right, let me fill it one more time because I'm just being extra generous with my glitter. Oops. Oops, I'm just slow, messing up this morning. And see, I am putting quite a bit on there, so that's why I'm having to refill so often. You could put a little shaker top on it if you wanted to, or just tap it like this. You don't need that much on there to absorb the glitter. Just a little tap is plenty. Trying to outrun the sun. The sun's coming up. It's quite early here still. And it's actually getting kind of hot. Alright, so I'm going to pause again for a moment and go ahead and finish this out, and then I'll come back and show you how to remove the tape. Okay, I'm back, and I think I'm starting to get a shadow, so I'll try and hurry up. But once I've gotten my glitter on there, if you're using a lower end glitter, you would want to tap it down, but with Bruce's glitter, you don't need to. It's so fine, it lays down really well. I'm definitely getting a shadow. So let me pause one more time and see if I can move a little bit. Alright, I think the sun is coming up enough that it's the camera itself that's shadowing me. So again, with Bruce's glitter, you don't really have to tap it down, but if you see anything that looks weird, just tap it lightly. You can, if you don't have a lot of epoxy on this where it's going to be slippery, just sit it down in the glitter pile to make sure your rim is well coated, and then you can take your finger and just put it inside to get out the glitter that sticks to the inside, because you don't want to waste it. And it's not necessarily that it has epoxy or anything on it, it's just you know, the static cling or whatever. Alright, so there's the gorgeous Surf's Up. Can you see that sparkle, y'all? It's just insane. It really is. It's pretty. So now you want to go ahead and remove your tape with the glitter on the epoxy. The epoxy will no longer run, so, or move, if you've applied enough and you don't see any shiny flat spots anywhere. If you do happen to see one, you can just add a little more glitter. I do think I see one right there. So I'll just tap it off, and then make sure I'm in frame for this one. Just pull up and away. That's what I do. Not really far away, just not at a sharp angle, just kind of a little bit of an angle. And then if you have any spots that look weird, I'll just take my finger and kind of let it roll very lightly toward to lay any little raised areas down. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You're going to let this sit for, a few hours. I normally let it sit for at least 3 or 4 before I put my next coat of epoxy on to seal the glitter in. And before I put the epoxy on, I'm so sorry about getting out of frame, guys. It's hard to see out here. Before I put my next coat of epoxy on to seal the glitter in, I normally use a couple of coats of the Krylon triple thick clear glaze. Now, what does that do? That helps, in my opinion, it does a couple of things. It helps lock in that glitter so you're not going to have any clumping if you have extra glitter on the outside. I will take an old paintbrush and lightly brush it off before I put the triple thick on there. But when you put your epoxy on, you won't have it clumping up under your finger or under your brush. So that helps to do that. And it does honestly make your epoxy turn out better. So you can do it or you don't have to. If you have another way you like, then go for it. I'm not saying that's how you have to do it. All right, guys, I'm going to go and have some more coffee. I'm sorry the video is not very good. I'm really not very good at these, but I think you get the gist of it. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comment, and I'll be happy to help. Thanks.